The topic of conversation this week, guys, is going to be about TLC whilst on the challenge. Let's start off by talking about energy and expenditure. So what is energy? Energy is a universal currency within the body that is used to carry out certain functioning. Every function within the body is driven off energy. Energy is a finite resource that needs to be wisely managed and invested. We expend energy through numerous processes within the body and not just movement. Every biological process that takes place in the body will involve a unit of energy in some way, shape, or form. Excessive energy expenditure actually leads to stress. So we know that excessive amounts of energy expenditure leads to stress. Stress must be managed in order to ensure that the body can utilize as much available energy for important functionings within the body. This process of managing stress or assets within the body is known as recovery. Okay, so we're going to talk about cortisol. Cortisol has been dubbed the killer of modern man. We need to understand the link between cortisol and stress, and therefore its production. Cortisol actually gets released upon perceived stress. So within situations of stress, the body releases cortisol to carry out certain functions. So the function of cortisol is, it increases our blood glucose levels or our blood sugar levels. Within the body, sugar is the most utilizable energy source. So much more utilizable than something like fat and something like proteins. So it's our go-to upon stressful situations in order to increase our energy levels. So how does it increase our energy levels? When cortisol gets released into the body, it causes our stored sugars to be broken down. These stored sugars are in the form of glycogen. When these stored sugars get broken down, it means the cells can therefore use them because they're in a more simplistic form. This simplistic form, is known as glucose. So glucose is one of the fundamental elements of respiration. So respiration is the process in the body of making energy. This energy goes back to what we know as ATP. So if we have an increased glucose amount or increased glucose volume within the body, what happens is we get an increased energy production as well. These two things are linear. They both are proportional. So for example, if you think you've got increased glucose, what happens is these cells in the body will now metabolize that glucose in order to produce excessive amounts of energy in order to allow that recovery of the depletion or normalize our energy levels or actually excessively improve our energy levels. So what is this response a part of? This response is known as the fight or flight response. You've probably heard of that. So along with cortisol, something like a hormone known as adrenaline and noradrenaline get released. The fight or flight response is an innate biological response that is an evolutionary predisposition. So for example, when we were cavemen running around, and looking for food, there were predators that would actually pose harm to us. To actually put a response in place that allowed us to go into a state of hyperdrive. So this fight or flight response is known as a sympathetic response and prepares the body for a stressful situation. So for example, symptoms such as increased blood flow to the brain, improves decision making, that takes place upon a stressful situation or that fight or flight response. Something like increased blood supply to the muscles, increased metabolization of glucose, which we talked about, increased VO2 max, so increase in your intake of oxygen, etc. It's all in line with producing excessive amounts of energy in order to survive that event. However, within today's society, we do not necessarily have these same dangers within our life. So, I don't know about you, I've never been chased by a tiger down the street. So there's no need for us to produce. However, this biological process, although it's not necessarily as needed, is still prominent and still working within the body. So stress such as financial stress, job stress, etc., they will all cause this response. We will be chronically drip-fed adrenaline, we will be chronically drip-fed noradrenaline, and we will actually be commonly drip-fed cortisol. So why is this negative? So let's go into the negative implications of excessive amounts of cortisol within the body. So, cortisol actually causes muscular degeneration. You can see how this would have adverse effects if you were on the challenge and will affect your progression quite significantly. Cortisol also causes increased visceral fat in addition to decrease in adipose fat. So what is adipose fat?
Adipose fat is the fat that you have underneath your skin, whereas visceral fat is the fat that you have around your organs, in addition in your circulatory system. Fat in your circulatory system will actually cause the onset of many coronary heart diseases, such as heart attacks, etc. Whereas fat around your organs can actually lead to many issues, such as organ failure. Cortisol actually causes reduced satiety. So going back to what we talked about last week, satiety is that feeling of satisfaction after consumption. Okay, because we need sugar to actually drive a response, it causes a craving of sugar. In addition, cortisol will actually cause a reduced production of something known as secretory IgA. So, what is this? Secretory IgA is a coating that surrounds the lining of your intestine, which has immunological properties, okay? Can lead to things like leaky gut syndrome, etc. So we need to make sure for our immune system that this is maintained in a nice tip-top position. Going back to the idea of increased blood glucose levels and manipulation within our glucose levels, it causes insulin sensitivity. So when excessive amounts of glucose are in the body, insulin is released in order to rectify this to a normal level. So insulin sensitivity will be a subsequent feature of excessive cortisol within the body. Okay, this is really negative. It can lead to things like diabetes, etc. Increased cortisol levels will actually cause reduced bone density. Reduced bone density is known as osteoporosis. Osteoporosis can lead to other disorders such as osteoarthritis, which you're probably more common with. So essentially, the integrity of the muscles, or the structural integrity of the muscles, will deplete. It's actually been correlated that excessive amounts or chronic amounts of cortisol within the body leads to reduced frontal lobe activity. So the frontal lobe is actually very prominent in things like processing ability, rational thinking, and intelligence. So all of these factors are reduced. In addition, an antibody known as Th2 is excessively produced. This antibody's production actually reduces immunological functioning, as excessive amounts of energy are used building up this antibody rather than in other immunological processes. Finally, there is decreased hippocampus activity. So this decreased activity actually leads to degeneration diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay guys, so now that we've spoken about the negative implications of cortisol or excessive amounts of cortisol within the body, we need to now understand how to manage these levels as efficiently as possible. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into depth about my 3 main methods in order to reduce cortisol level to a healthy amount.
So the first method that we're going to use in order to reduce cortisol levels within the body, in addition to prompting that idea of physiological reduction in stress, is known as the cold therapy method. So this method was actually made popular by a man named Wim the Iceman Hof. So cold exposure can actually be used as a tool in order to improve immunological functioning, increase fat loss due to a hormone known as adiponectin, in addition to things like a psychological tool and training your mind to install a sense of calm within your physiology. Ultimately, ice baths are actually used to speed recovery after exercise. The contrast between hot and cold submersion will actually cause blood to rush to the muscles, theoretically taking away any waste products of training and replenishing the muscles with fresh oxygenated blood. Little tip guys, do not overexpose the body to cold. Remember, cortisol. Excessive exposure can actually cause cortisol to be released because it puts that body in a state of stress. So there are 2 methods in order to undergo what's known as cold therapy. The first method can be in a shower, the second can be in a bath. So while showering, so for example during your daily shower, turn down the heat periodically. I normally go for a ratio of 60 seconds of cold followed by 60 seconds of room temperature. What you need to make sure you're doing is install a sense of consistent breathing, okay? I always aim for 10 breaths, 6 seconds apiece, inhalation for 4 seconds and exhalation for 2. Okay, so that's 10 breaths within that minute period that you're going for. In addition, ice baths. Fill a bath with cold water. If possible, add half a bag of ice. Okay, stay in the ice bath for 6 to 8 minutes. Try not to excessively expose your body to cold. Make sure when you get out, you dry off and warm yourself up. Second method that I really like in order to reduce psychological stress in addition to physical stress is meditation and breathing techniques. So these techniques are actually used to put the body in a state of physiological and psychological calm. Installing these elements within your day is essential. Pressing pause during your downtime will prepare you to work to a higher degree and will allow you to focus on unlocking sources of information. It's actually been found that 6 breaths can actually change your physiological state. So the first method I'd like to talk about is something known as equal breathing. Okay, so the reason why I've prescribed this is actually the easiest to get a grip of. So how does equal breathing work? What you do, you inhale and exhale for the exact same count. I usually use a count of 4. However, the further you get or the more you practice it, the deeper and the longer that you can exhale and the longer that you can inhale. So the aim is to try and get a bit of a longer period in between your breaths. The second method is known as abdominal breathing, okay, or the abdominal breathing technique. How it's done. With one hand, put your hand on your chest and the other on your stomach. Take a deep breath in through the nose, ensuring that the diaphragm inflates with enough air to create a stretch in the lungs. Okay, essentially getting as much oxygen into the body as possible. The goal is to take 6 to 10 deep, slow breaths per minute for 10 minutes each day, which will experience an immediate reduction in heart rate and blood pressure. So what this does is it puts us into a state of psychological calm in addition to physiological calm, allow us to install a sense of meditation. The final method that I'd like to introduce is something known as progressive relaxation. Within progressive relaxation, the first step is to close your eyes and focus on tensing and relaxing each muscle group for 2 to 3 seconds at a time. Start with feet and toes and then move up to the knees, thighs, glutes, chest, arms, hands, neck, jaw and eyes while maintaining a deep, slow breath. Breathe in through the nose, hold for a count of 5 while the muscles tense, and then breathe out and allow the muscles to release. So this installs a state of physiological relaxation. This tensile strength at the beginning, followed by a period of relaxation, allows the muscles ultimately to relax. So the final tool that we're going to use in order to install this sense of recovery, this is going to be more based on a physiological response, is known as muscular release. So the method in order to allow the muscles to release is known as the pressure wave approach. So how this works is we focus on working through deeper layers of muscle and tissue in order to gradually break up large muscle mass layers, in addition to relieving what's known as a trigger point. So a trigger point is a tension area in the muscle which is normally tender to the touch and feels like there's knots. So for example, if you go down the length of the muscle, you feel somewhat restriction. It's like a clump of muscle. So what we need to do is we need to break that up. The breakup of these tension points will actually aid muscular recovery. Will actually allow the muscles to relax in addition to improving the joint range of motion, because if the muscle is tight, it's therefore restricted. The combination of these benefits will actually improve or allow an increase in injury prevention whilst on the challenge. We want to make sure you guys are in tip-top position whilst on the next 8 weeks. So tight muscles are actually very susceptible to injury, so this needs to be a massively prioritized element to your recovery. How do we do this? So whilst using this method, we need to use 2 pieces of equipment. We need to use a trigger point ball or a massage ball in addition to a foam roller. The first step that we need to actually use in order to allow this sense of muscular recovery, we need to lie on the ball or the roller, making sure to remain completely relaxed with the goal to sink into the deepest part of the muscle, putting all of your bodily pressure on that point. We then create a pressure wave. We're going to slowly roll the target area over the ball or the foam roller with our full weight of our body over the roller. We need to make sure we roll the length of the muscle. During the movement, go as slowly as possible.